"Sir, this whole stretch of bank is restricted until 1400. Roger Tierney didn't look up. His eyes stayed on the water where his line entered it, barely a ripple, the float sitting dead in the gray morning calm. "What tide are they running the exercise on?" Aldo Radford lowered his duty board an inch. He was young, maybe 25, with the easy confidence of a man whose questions had always landed on solid ground before he finished asking them. He looked out at the lake, the flat, landlocked freshwater lake 60 miles from the nearest tidal influence, and then back at the weathered figure in the faded olive shirt. "Sir, this is a lake." Roger finally turned his head. His eyes went to Aldo's hands first, then the gravel path behind him, then his face. "I know what it is," Roger said. Aldo drew a breath, lips parting, then pressed them shut again. The question about tides had landed somewhere between confusion and irritation, and he hadn't quite decided which way to fall. "Sir," he tried again, the word coated with a patience he didn't feel. "This is a restricted training corridor. The orange buoys mark the boundary. You're within it." Roger looked back at the water. "I'm on the bank," he said. That was it. No argument, no posture, just a flat statement of geography, offered the way you'd read a map, coordinate aloud to someone who already had the grid in front of them. Aldo made a note on his form, or pretended to, and walked back up the gravel toward the staging area, deciding the old man would either comply or become someone else's problem. Neither possibility seemed to cost Roger Tierney a single degree of attention. He settled the rod back against the bank bracket he'd pressed into the soft clay himself. Years ago, the bracket was nothing, just a forked stick he cut and sharpened and drove into the earth every Tuesday, until eventually it stayed year-round. He reached into the tackle bag without looking. His fingers found the line weight he wanted on the first pass. Economy of motion so complete, it looked like something other than skill. It looked like not caring, which is almost the same thing, and nothing like it at all. The sun was not yet above the eastern tree line. The water was pewter-colored and flat, moving in the subtle, rhythmic pull that freshwater lakes have in the hour before the light changes. Not the same as tidal draw, nothing like the dark coastal chop he had read by feel from the bow of a rigid-hull inflatable in complete radio silence, but close enough that if he sat with it a while, something in his chest unknotted by one notch. That was why he came. Not for the fish. He'd caught 3 in the last 4 months and released them all before they'd fully registered. Not for the solitude exactly, though the quiet helped. He came because the water moved, and when it moved, it sounded like something he recognized at a depth that had no language attached to it anymore. He'd run coastal approaches in 6 different theaters, under 4 different command elements, and the one constant in all of them was the sound of water moving against a hull at low speed in the dark. That sound lived somewhere behind his sternum. He couldn't get rid of it. He'd stopped trying. He heard a truck on the gravel road above the launch ramp. His eyes moved before he'd decided to move them, to the cab, to the hands on the wheel visible through the windshield, to the passenger, back to the water, a breath. His body had not shifted at all. The tackle bag sat open beside him, and near the bottom of it, beneath the line spools and the small folding knife and the waterproof pouch of spare swivels, was the logbook. Leather-covered, dark brown going to black at the corners. The waxed thread binding had cracked along the spine but held. He took it out the same way every time, just after the rod was set and before the lake fully woke up. He opened it to the last entry. He'd read it enough times to know each word before his eyes reached it. He read it anyway. Took maybe 20 seconds. Then he closed the cover, ran his thumb along the spine once, and set it on the ground beside his left knee, where he could see it without looking directly at it. He didn't write anything. He hadn't written anything in a long time. A great blue heron landed on the far bank without a sound, folded its wings, and went motionless above the water. Roger watched it the way he watched everything. Briefly, completely, and then not at all. His attention already returned to some middle distance that had no name on any chart. The buoys had drifted. 3 of them, orange and fat in the early light, had shifted maybe 4 feet northeast from where they'd been anchored an hour ago. Roger had been watching them without appearing to watch them. He knew the drift rate now, Knew the bottom current was running slightly faster than the surface, which meant whatever the training cadre thought they'd secured to those anchor lines had a little more drag on it than their charts accounted for. If they were running an insertion corridor off those buoys, they were running it 6 degrees off their intended line. He didn't say anything. It wasn't his exercise. He set his rod against the dock railing, handle resting easy, and reached into the tackle bag between his feet. His hands moved without rushing, unsnapping the side pocket, lifting out the logbook, setting it on his knee. The leather was dark at the corners, where his palm had worn it. The waxed thread across the spine had cracked in 3 places, and he'd re-waxed it twice, and it had cracked again. He'd stopped fighting it. He opened it to the last entry, not searching for it. He always opened to the same page, the way a book opens to the place it's been opened 100 times before. 1 date, 1 line. He read it the way you read something you already know, not taking it in so much as confirming it's still there. He closed it, set it back in the bag. The sun had begun to lift over the tree line to the east, breaking the mist into long, flat columns above the water. This was why he came on Tuesdays. Not because Tuesday meant anything, it didn't, not anymore. But early Tuesday was when the lake road stayed empty longest, when the water held that low-light texture, slate gray shading into silver, that moved the way certain coastal approaches had moved. Shallow angle water, water with weight to it. He had run those approaches in the dark, in the silence, before an operation broke open, and the sound the water made against the hull had become something he'd carried without knowing he was carrying it. He'd been retired for 9 years. He had a house 12 minutes from this bank, with a vegetable garden that needed more attention than he gave it, and a neighbor who waved at him from the road every morning and knew nothing about him. That was fine. That was good, actually. He had built that quiet deliberately, the way you build a perimeter, methodically, with purpose, checking the gaps. But the quiet had a sound he hadn't expected. It was just quiet. Nothing in it. No water, no hull, no low hum of an engine throttled back to near nothing while you held your breath and read the surface for what was underneath. This lake sounded like it did. That was all. That was enough. A pickup truck came down the gravel road, and he tracked it without turning his head. Engine note, speed, the slight hesitation before the driver found the ramp. 1 occupant, civilian rig, but loaded heavier than a civilian would loaded on a Tuesday. The bed sat lower than the cab weight alone would explain. Equipment. He filed it, released it. His fingers rested open on his thighs. 2 new vehicles came over the ridge behind the first. Larger. He read the roofline profile before he could stop himself. The way you read anything, automatically, without deciding to. His body had opinions his mind didn't always get a vote on anymore. He looked at the water instead. The middle buoy had drifted another foot. If someone was using that line as a reference marker for a night approach, they'd need to compensate. He thought about the hydraulic bleed signature of a hard-over helm at speed in shallow water, and then he stopped thinking about it, because that was the kind of thinking that had no use here. He picked up his rod. The heron on the far bank hadn't moved. "Sir, I'm not going to ask you again." Aldo came back up the gravel path with more stride in him this time, like he'd rehearsed something on the walk over. A younger operator trailed behind him, mid-20s, built across the shoulders, wearing a dry suit top unzipped to the waist. The kid looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. He'd been sent as weight, not as backup, and he knew it. Roger didn't look up from the water. The restricted corridor runs bank to bank, from the first buoy line to the tree line on the south end. Aldo gestured across the lake, like he was explaining something to someone slow. "You are inside that corridor. You need to relocate." Roger's eyes moved once, to the young operator's hands, then to the tree line Aldo had just pointed at, then back to the water, unhurried, complete. "Your outer buoys," Roger said. "You set them at even spacing or anchored by depth." The operator blinked. "What?" "Your markers. The orange ones." Roger tilted his chin toward the line of buoys. "Third one from the ramp is running about 4 feet south of where you set it this morning. Current's pushing it. If your inside corridor moves with it, your safety margin on the south bank just compressed." The young operator turned and looked at the buoy line. He looked at it for a long moment, Then he looked back at Roger, the way a person looks at a door that suddenly opened where they didn't expect one. Aldo stepped in front of him. "That is not your concern." His voice had picked up an edge now, the kind that comes from feeling authority slip. "This is a federally restricted training area during an active exercise window. You don't have clearance to be in this zone, and I need you to pack your gear and move to the public access area on the north end." Roger set the rod across his knees. His hands went back to his thighs, fingers open, easy. "How long have you been range liaison?" he asked. Aldo's jaw tightened. "Long enough." "Long enough," Roger repeated, without inflection. "Look." Aldo dropped the formal register, going for something that probably worked on other people. A kind of patient condescension, like talking someone down from a ledge they don't even realize they're standing on. "I get it. You've been coming to this lake for years. It's your spot. I understand that. But these men have a training evolution that matters, and right now you are in the way of it. Nobody's trying to give you a hard time. Just pack up, move north, and you can have your spot back by noon." The young operator was still looking at the third buoy. Roger didn't answer immediately. He watched the water the way he always watched it. Not casually, not the way a man killing a Tuesday morning watches water, but with the specific economy of attention that belongs to someone who has read current and tide and surface texture in circumstances where reading them wrong meant not coming back. The buoy moved another inch, maybe 2. "Third buoy will be another 6 inches south by the time your boats launch," Roger said. "Your inside margin will be 18 feet, not 24. Tight for a boat running at speed with a full complement." Aldo took a breath. "Let it out." "Sir," he said, with the word doing all the wrong work, "I don't know what you think you understand about what these men do, but I can assure you, they're running a timed insertion drill," Roger said quietly. "Single rib, 4 or 5 operators, South Bank approach. Launch windows about 40 minutes out." Aldo stopped. The young operator finally turned away from the buoy. The silence between them held, no words offered, none reached for. Roger picked up his rod again and watched the water. "I'm going to need a name and a contact number," Aldo said, "for the incident report. If you won't relocate voluntarily, there's a liability notation that goes. Write what you need to write." Aldo's jaw tightened. He had the practiced frustration of someone who was accustomed to forms and protocols doing his authority for him, and right now, neither was cooperating. He scribbled something on his papers, more for the motion of it than any real purpose, and the younger operator beside him shifted his weight from foot to foot and said nothing. Down at the gravel ramp, someone called out. Then another voice. The team was staging. Roger didn't turn his head. He didn't need to. He heard the ramp noise and categorized it without moving. The drag of the hull on gravel. The particular complaint of a rigid hull inflatable being walked to water by people who had done it 100 times but never loved doing it. The kind of sound that had a rhythm to it. He knew the rhythm. Aldo glanced toward the ramp. Some of the authority drained out of his posture when he did, like he'd remembered there were more important things happening than one stubborn old man with a fishing pole. He muttered something about the training window and walked off toward the ramp, his papers tucked under his arm. Roger watched the water. The rib hit the lake clean. They launched it well. He'd give them that. Whoever was running the team knew what they were doing in terms of getting the boat wet. 4 operators aboard, 2 on the bank managing the tow lines. The outboards came up together, a low, disciplined rumble that carried flat across the water and reached Roger's ears a half second before the vibration did. He noticed the sound first. Not the engines, the hydraulics. There was a pressure drop signature in the way the trim adjusted, almost too subtle to catch. A slight overcorrection from the helm. Then another. The boat was moving well enough, building speed toward the first orange buoy, and nobody on board seemed concerned. They had a timed drill to run, and a training window measured in minutes. Of course they weren't concerned. Roger set his rod across his knees. His eyes tracked the rib with the kind of attention that has nothing recreational in it. The same eyes that had read coastal water at night, from the bow of a boat, not unlike that one, in places that do not appear on any training schedule. He watched the helm operator's shoulders, watched the correction at the wheel. watched the quarter-second lag between input and response that shouldn't be there. He'd seen it before, not in a training lake in the daylight, in swells, in the dark, with the engine noise masked and the nearest friendly position 12 miles behind him. He knew what caused it, and he knew what it became if nobody caught it. The cable didn't announce itself. It bled quietly, and then, at the worst possible moment, at speed, in a turn, in the middle of something that depended on the boat going exactly where you told it, it stopped working entirely. His fingers opened slightly against his thighs. On the bank, Aldo was talking to a petty officer near the ramp, gesturing toward the training corridor, explaining something about the liability notation and the local who refused to move. The petty officer was half listening, tracking the boat with his own eyes. Roger turned back to the water. The Reeb reached the second buoy and began its turn. The helmsman gave input. The boat responded. Slowly, a degree late, a degree wide. Not enough to abort. Not enough for anyone watching casually to call it a problem. Roger knew what it was. He picked up his rod, laid it flat against the bank, and folded his hands quietly in his lap. And he waited. "You have to understand," Aldo was saying, "that these aren't weekend warriors out there. These are—" The radio on his belt crackled. Then a voice came through it. Not calm. "Steering's gone. Full loss, starboard cable. We're drifting." Aldo stopped talking. On the water, the inflatable had swung broadside to the training corridor, its bow drifting lazily toward the far buoy line. Two operators at the stern were moving, hands on the engine housing, heads down, and even from the bank you could hear the change in the motor's pitch, that uneven throttle surge that meant someone was trying to compensate with thrust alone and getting nowhere. Roger didn't stand yet. He watched the boat the way you watch something you've already diagnosed. Aldo keyed his radio. "What's the status on steerage?" A pause. Then, "We can't isolate it. Hydraulic, we think. Could be the cable. Could be the tiller arm. We don't know." Aldo looked at the water, then at his radio, then at the water again. That was when gravel crunched behind them. Roger heard the footsteps before Aldo did. The particular cadence of someone who runs regularly, moving fast but controlled, decelerating early. He didn't turn his head. He just shifted his weight slightly, and his eyes dropped to gauge the shadow angle crossing the bank grass. Then a voice said, "Ghost." Not a question. Not loud. Just the word, landing flat and final, the way a call sign lands when the person saying it hasn't said it in years and wasn't sure they'd ever need to again. Roger turned. Horace Winfield had stopped 6 feet away on the gravel. He was maybe 40, broad through the shoulders, wearing the same nondescript gear as the rest of the team. And he was breathing, not from the run, but from something else entirely. His jaw had gone tight. His eyes were doing the same scan Roger's did, face to hands to exits, but right now they weren't moving at all. They were locked. He said it again, quieter this time. "Ghost." Then he seemed to remember where he was and who was standing nearby, and he straightened fractionally and said, "Sir." Across the water, an operator on the inflatable looked up toward the bank. Then another one. The radio traffic went quiet. Aldo had turned to look at Horace. His arm was still partially raised, the radio half lifted from where he'd been about to key it again. He stayed exactly like that for a beat, watching Horace Winfield, a master chief, plainly, from the way the nearest operators had gone attentive the moment he jogged in. Watching this master chief look at the weathered figure in the faded olive shirt, with an expression that didn't belong in the category of professional recognition. It was something older than that, something that had weight behind it. The inflatable drifted another 2 meters to the east. Nobody on shore said anything about it. Aldo's mouth, which had been open around a sentence, closed. The sentence didn't come back. Roger looked at Horace steadily. The years were visible between them. The distance, the accumulation of everything neither of them would say out loud. Not here, not in front of a training evolution on a Tuesday morning. But Horace's posture said enough. Shoulders dropped half an inch. The kind of drop you don't perform. The kind that happens when something you've been carrying gets briefly lighter because someone else is in the room. Roger gave him a single nod. Then he picked up his rod, set it aside, and stood. Not hurried, not dramatic, Just a man getting up off a bank, the way you get up when something needs doing, and you're the one who knows how to do it. He looked out at the drifting boat. What line diameter is the steering cable? He said. Flat. Not asking permission. Horace Winfield didn't answer the steering cable question. He was looking at Roger's hands, then his face. Then he took one more step up the gravel bank and stopped like he'd walked into glass. The operators on shore had gone to the edge of the ramp. Two of them were on radios. One was already pulling a safety line off the dock cleat. The boat sat 30 yards out, turning slowly with the current, no correction in it at all. None of them were looking at Horace. Horace was not moving. "Shepherd," he said. Low, almost under his breath. Then, louder, catching himself, "Master Chief Tierney." A half-beat. "Sir." The word hit the air and stayed there. The operator on the radio lowered it. The one at the dock cleat straightened up. Two men on the near bank who had been mid-crouch just stopped. 20 years of training, and they all turned at the same time, the way a single sound at night will turn an entire patrol with no order given. One face, then another, then all of them, tracking to the man in the olive shirt sitting beside a tackle bag with a fishing pole propped against his knee. Aldo's arm was still raised. The clipboard was still angled forward. The sentence he'd been building, something about liability, about protocols, about men who didn't understand what real training looked like, was simply gone. Not interrupted. Gone. Like a fire that runs out of air. Roger didn't stand yet. He looked at Horace for a long moment, unhurried, the way he looked at everything. "You got taller," he said. Horace let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. "I was 19. You were," Roger said. One of the younger operators, couldn't have been more than 24, leaned toward the petty officer beside him and said something quiet. The petty officer shook his head once, the kind of headshake that means "not now," and also means "I'll explain later," and also means "be quiet and pay attention." Horace walked the last 4 steps up the bank. He was a big man, broad through the shoulders, and he moved like someone who had learned a long time ago to be careful with how much space he took up. He stopped at a respectful distance, and his posture changed. Not a formal brace, something older than that. The way you stand when someone taught you something that kept you alive. "You know what's wrong with it," Horace said. Not a question. "Yes. Can you fix it?" Roger's eyes went back to the boat. He watched it for 3 seconds, reading its drift the way he'd read 100 coastal margins in the dark, calculating where it would be in 2 minutes, in 5. His fingers opened slightly on his thighs. "Give me your paracord," he said, "and I need a straight branch, dry, about this long." He held his hands apart, a precise measurement, not approximate, maybe 40 centimeters. Consistent diameter. Horace was already turning, already talking before he'd fully pivoted, pulling a length of cord from his kit. 2 operators moved into the tree line without being told. They knew what consistent diameter meant. They'd been briefed on the kind of field expedient thinking that filled gaps when equipment failed, and no one was coming to help. Aldo Radford had not moved. He was watching Roger stand, slowly, no rush, and take the paracord from Horace's hand with the focused economy of someone conducting a pre-op check in the dark. No performance in it, no awareness of the audience, just a man moving toward a problem the way he had always moved toward problems. The clipboard came down. Aldo didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say. Roger set his rod against the dock post. Didn't hand it to anyone. Didn't ask permission. Just set it down and walked toward the ramp with the same unhurried economy he'd used to open his tackle bag that morning. And the operators on shore moved out of his way without being told to do so. Horace watched from the bank. He didn't speak. The inflatable was drifting 20 yards out, its bow swinging lazy and wrong. 2 operators with paddles trying to arrest the rotation. Roger reached the water's edge and crouched at the ramp's lip, his eyes on the transom. He listened. Not to the shouting, to the engine. 3 seconds. "Hydraulic bleed on the port steering cylinder," he said. "Not loud, just clear. Pressure drop is gradual, not instant. Lines seeping, not burst. You've still got engine. You've got nothing else." One of the shore operators looked at the team's lead petty officer. The petty officer looked at Roger. "How do you..." Because it makes a different sound when the line ruptures clean. Roger was already unzipping his tackle bag. This one's been breathing for a few minutes. You heard it before you felt it. You just didn't know what you were hearing. He pulled a coil of paracord from the bag's outer pocket. 60 feet. Olive drab. Coiled tight the way someone coils cord who plans to use it again. He looked at the tree line. I need a branch. Dry hardwood, not green, about yay long. He held his hands apart. A specific gap, not an estimate. Diameter of a man's thumb, no more. Somebody move. Somebody moved. Fast. He turned back to the water and called out to the drifting boat in the same flat register. Cut the engine. Both paddles port side. Let her coast in. The boat came in slowly. An operator on the bow caught the ramp with his hand and held them. Roger stepped into the shallows without rolling his trousers. The rubber boots took the water. He crouched at the outboard steering assembly, and his hands went straight to the port hydraulic fitting, without searching. No hesitation, no visual sweep, just muscle memory finding a location it had visited many times in conditions much worse than this. Confirmed, he said quietly, mostly to himself. The branch arrived. He eyeballed it once, pulled a fixed blade knife from the same tackle bag, and cut the branch to a length that matched a measurement only in his head, shaved the ends smooth in 4 strokes, and set it against the tiller arm. You're going to lash this here and here. He indicated 2 points on the tiller and transom bracket. 7 wraps, half hitch to lock, leave a tail long enough to grip. This becomes your steering. It's not comfortable, and it's not fast, but it's precise if you work it slowly. Don't fight it. Move with the engine's torque. He was already rapping as he spoke. The paracord moved through his fingers the way it moves through the fingers of a man who learned knots, the way other men learn to breathe. Without watching, without counting, without thought. 90 seconds later he stood back. Take her out to the second buoy and make your turn. Keep it slow. You'll feel the resistance. When you feel it, don't correct hard. Ease through it. The lead petty officer looked at the repair, looked at Roger. His mouth opened once and closed again. 4 minutes, one of the younger operators said to no one in particular. He'd been timing it. Roger waded back out of the shallows, water sheeting off the rubber boots, and picked up a rag from the ramp's edge to wipe his hands. The team watched him the way you watch something that doesn't quite fit inside the categories you arrived with. Aldo Radford was at the edge of the gravel. His clipboard was at his side. He hadn't moved in 4 minutes. The boat came back to the ramp under its own power. Slow, a little sideways, but moving. The operators pulled it up the concrete, and 2 of them crouched immediately to look at the cable housing, studying the paracord fix, the way you study something you don't fully believe you're seeing. One of them said something to another. The other one just shook his head. Roger dried his hands on his trousers and walked back to his spot on the bank. He sat down, picked up his rod, set it across his knees. The sun was well above the trees by now. The lake had gone from gray to a flat, pale blue, and the orange buoys caught the light and held it. He counted them the way he always did. Spacing looked right. Current drift, minimal. He heard Horace coming before he saw him. Gravel shifting under boots that knew how to move quietly but weren't bothering. Horace sat down beside him. Not close enough to crowd. Close enough to talk. For a minute, neither of them said anything. A long minute. The kind that used to pass between men in small boats waiting for a signal that might not come. You never came to any of the reunions, Horace said finally. Not an accusation. Closer to something he'd been carrying a while, and decided, today, to set down. Roger looked at the water. No. The ones after Coronado. The one in Virginia Beach. We put your name on the board every year. I know. Horace waited. That was something Roger had always respected about him. He knew how to wait. Roger reached into the tackle bag. Not for a lure. He brought out the logbook. The leather was dark at the spine from years of handling. The waxed thread binding pale and split along one edge. He turned it to the last entry without looking. He knew exactly where it was, the way you know the weight of a thing you've carried too long. And he held it out. Horace took it. He read it twice. Roger could tell by the pause. The entry was dated. 15 years back. 2 lines. A name. Not Roger's. And below it, in the same careful hand, got him home. 7 words. Horace closed the book slowly and held it in both hands and didn't speak for a long moment. Delgado, he said. Quiet. Just the name. He had a daughter he hadn't met yet, Roger said. 8 days old when we went in. He showed me the photo on the tarmac. He paused. I memorized her face because I didn't want to forget what we were going back for. The water moved. Small, unhurried. He made it, Horace said. He made it. And you never told anyone you were the reason. Roger almost said something, then didn't. He watched a fish rise near the far buoy. A small disturbance, gone in a second. I didn't come here to be remembered, he said quietly. Not to Horace, not to the team, almost to the water itself. I came here because it's the only place that still sounds like it did. Horace didn't answer that. There wasn't an answer for it. He just sat with it, the way it deserved. He handed the logbook back. Roger tucked it into the bag without looking at it. The same way he always did. The same way he would next Tuesday, and the Tuesday after. Behind them, somewhere on the gravel, Aldo Radford was still there. Roger didn't look. He didn't need to. He could hear the man breathing, slow and careful now, like someone learning for the first time to be quiet, in a place that already had enough noise in it. The lake did what it always did. It moved, and it sounded exactly like it always had. Roger stood, tucked the rod under his arm, and walked. Not quickly, not slowly. The gravel shifted under his boots the same way it always did, and he didn't look back at the team, or at Horace, or at Aldo Radford standing at the edge of the ramp with his clipboard loose at his side. He walked the length of the dock, and at the near post, the old one, weathered gray, the one he'd tied his line to every Tuesday for going on 9 years, he set the logbook down. Both hands, deliberate, the waxed thread caught the morning light for just a moment. Then he kept walking. His truck was parked where it always was, at the far end of the gravel lot, nose toward the access road out of habit. He didn't look back when he opened the door, didn't look back when the engine turned over. Horace stood at the ramp and watched him go. He didn't call out, didn't move toward the dock. The logbook sat on the post in the full morning sun. The lake moved behind it, quiet and even, the way a coastal approach sounds just before first light, when everything is still possible and nothing has yet gone wrong.